I sat at my kitchen table on a Sunday night and watched my phone light up for the 7th time in 2 hours. My mother's name on the screen, same as the 6 times before it. I turned it face down and left it there. 2 hours earlier, I had been doing what I did every Sunday for 12 years, which was going through whatever the family had let slide that week before it became a problem. That night, it was my Uncle Raymond's car insurance sitting 3 days from lapsing because nobody had looked at it and nobody was going to look at it until they needed to drive somewhere and found out the hard way. I pulled up the account and made the payment and closed the tab. Didn't tell anyone. Never did. That was the job. Not what anyone gave me or asked me to do. Just the one I showed up for anyway week after week, because if I didn't, things fell apart in ways nobody saw coming until they were already in the middle of them. 12 years of that. 12 years of being the one who caught things before they hit the floor. And then 1 month I stopped. The phone lit up again. 8 calls now. I watched my mother's name glow against the dark kitchen, and I left it there face down on the table, and I didn't move to fix a single thing. My mother's name is Diane. Warm in every room she walks into, the kind of person who makes everyone feel like family. The problem with that is she'd spent years making family feel like obligation, and she never once noticed the difference. A normal Tuesday from about a year ago. My sister called just before 8 to tell me she was short on rent again, and could I spot her until Friday. I said yes, transferred the money, and went back to what I was doing. 20 minutes later, my father sent me a picture of a tax letter he'd received and typed underneath it, "Can you look at this?" Not a question. I opened the letter, sorted out what it was, drafted a response, and sent it back to him explained. Just before I went to bed, my mother messaged asking if I still had that contractor's number from the kitchen job 2 years ago. I found it in my contacts and forwarded it without a word. That was a Tuesday, a slow one. I had a spreadsheet on my laptop that I'd been keeping for years. Family birthdays, recurring bills, renewal dates, logging credentials for my parents' utilities because neither of them trusted themselves to remember a password. I had a standing calendar reminder every 3 months to check my brother Marcus's car insurance because he'd let it lapse twice before I started doing it for him, and he'd never once asked me to keep doing it. He just stopped worrying about it because he knew somewhere in the background I had it covered. None of it was ever assigned to me. There was no conversation where someone sat down and said, "We need someone to hold all of this together, and we think it should be you." It just accumulated, slowly, over years, task by task, until the whole architecture of the family's day-to-day stability was running quietly through me, and everyone had simply adjusted to that being true. I was 34 and I worked as a project manager, which I think is part of why it happened the way it did. I was good at tracking moving parts. I was good at seeing 3 steps ahead. And somewhere along the way, the people around me mistook competence for willingness and willingness for endless supply. The Sunday dinner where it finally landed happened on a warm evening in April. My mother had made enough food for twice the number of people at the table, which was her way. My father was there. My sister Paulette. Marcus across from me, 29 and easy in the way people are when someone else is quietly doing the hard work. It was a good evening. It felt like one of those family nights you describe to someone, and they'd say it sounds nice, and you'd say yes, it was. Then my mother set down her serving spoon and told the table she'd looked into a summer trip. A week away, all of us, somewhere she'd been wanting to go for years. She had the destination picked. She had rough dates in mind. And then she looked down the table and said it almost like an aside, like it was simply understood. "Daniel will sort the flights and the rental like he always does." Everyone laughed. My father nodded. Paula was already on her phone looking up the location. I set my fork down. I did not say anything. I did not smile along with the rest of them. I just set my fork down on the edge of the plate and sat with what had just happened. Marcus looked at me from across the table. Just a glance. He was the only one who caught it, the only one who noticed that I had gone still while everyone else kept moving. He did not say anything either. He just looked and then looked away. My mother was already describing the hotel. I was 22 the first time it happened. My father had a small accident in a parking lot. Nothing serious, no one hurt, just enough damage to file a claim. My mother had been on hold with the insurance company for 3 days and was getting nowhere. I sat down with the paperwork one afternoon, found the misfiling, called the right department, and had it resolved in about 40 minutes. My mother told everyone at the next family gathering that I was the responsible one. She said it like it was a title, like it had always been mine, and she was just finally announcing it out loud. Within a few months, every household problem that needed thinking through started landing with me. Not because anyone decided that formally, just because I had solved one thing, and solving one thing had apparently established what I was for. Rachel's college financial aid forms came next. My sister Rachel, 38 now, the kind of person who could walk into any room and own it inside of 5 minutes, and who had been quietly drowning in administrative tasks her entire adult life without ever quite managing to do anything about them. She handed me a folder of half-completed paperwork like she was doing me a favor by letting me finish it. I did. She got her aid. She never mentioned it again. Then my parents were in the middle of the kitchen remodel, and the contractor and my father stopped speaking to each other directly around week 2. I became the go-between. I relayed messages and smoothed things over and kept the project from collapsing. When my father's card was frozen on a family holiday because the bank flagged the foreign transaction, I was the one who called from a hotel lobby at 11 at night and stayed on hold until it was sorted while everyone else went to dinner. Every single task was small on its own. That was the thing. Not one of them would have looked like much if you described it to someone. But they did not stay small individually. They accumulated task after task, and the weight of them was cumulative in a way that nobody around me seemed to notice or think to ask about. Around year 4, I decided to say no to something. Rachel had an apartment move that weekend, and I'd been told, not asked, that I'd be coordinating it. I had my own plans. I called my mother and told her I couldn't do it that weekend. She didn't argue. She went quiet in the way she did when she was hurt, that particular silence that had a texture to it. And then she said it. I just thought family helped each other. I won't ask again. I want to be clear about what that sentence was. It was not an expression of disappointment. It was a mechanism, soft and precise and designed to land exactly where it did, which was in a part of me that had been raised to believe that being useful to this family was the same thing as being loved by it. She didn't speak to me directly for 3 days. Then at Sunday dinner, she mentioned to the table that Rachel had to manage the move mostly alone and how hard it had been for her. I did not refuse again after that. Not for 8 more years. I absorbed everything that came after without a word, and my mother never had to ask twice because I had already learned what it cost to say no, and I had decided the cost was too high. The job that had started at 22 with one resolved insurance claim had by year 4 already become something I could not put down. Not because anyone was holding it over me, because I'd been trained slowly and warmly to believe that putting it down made me the kind of person I did not want to be. I did not make an announcement. I did not send a message or call a meeting or explain what I was doing. I just decided one morning that I was going to stop moving toward problems before anyone noticed them. If someone called me directly and asked me something, I would answer. But I was done scanning the horizon, done checking the accounts and the deadlines and the renewal dates that nobody else thought to look at. I closed the spreadsheet and left it closed. I want to be honest about what I expected. I think I expected someone to notice within a few days. Not the absence of the work itself, but some small shift in the texture of things that would prompt a question or a comment. I expected someone to notice me not doing something and ask about it. Nobody noticed anything for 10 days. On day 10, my father missed a property tax deadline. It was the kind of thing I had been flagging for him for years, a standing item in the spreadsheet with a 2-week lead reminder. I had seen it coming. I had not said anything. The penalty was not catastrophic, but it was real, and it was unnecessary. And my mother called me that afternoon with a specific kind of tension in her voice that I recognized immediately. You usually catch these things, Daniel. What's going on with you? I told her I had been busy. I told her I assumed Dad was keeping track of it. The silence on the line after that had weight to it. Not the wounded silence from year 4. This one was sharper. the kind that meant she was recalibrating, deciding how to respond to something she had not anticipated. She said again, slower this time, that I usually caught these things. Like the problem was not that my father had missed his own deadline, but that I had failed to prevent him from doing so. Like my not intervening was the error that needed explaining. I told her again that I had been busy and I left it there. She did not accept that, and we both knew it, but she also did not push further. She ended the call in the careful way she did when she was storing something away for later. 2 days after that, Rachel sent me a text asking me to call her landlord about a leak in her bathroom. Not asking if I could, not asking if I had time, just asking me to do it the way you'd ask someone to pass the salt. I typed back the landlord's number and told her I was busy. She did not respond. Not that day, not the next, not for the rest of the week. No thank you, no acknowledgement, no reply at all. Just silence, which was its own kind of answer. The silence of someone who had expected a service and received something else and was deciding what to do about the disruption. I had been invisible for 12 years while I was helping. Now I was becoming visible in a different way, and nobody liked what they were starting to see. 3 weeks in, and the list of consequences was getting hard to ignore. The penalty notice from the missed property tax arrived at my father's house in a yellow envelope. He called me about it in the tone he used when something had gone wrong, and he needed someone else to be responsible for that. I listened and told him the payment portal was still open and he could clear the penalty online. He asked if I could just handle it. I told him I was in the middle of something and that it was straightforward, and I walked him through the steps over the phone and then said I had to go. Rachel's bathroom leak had gone from a drip to water damage because she had waited 11 days to call the landlord herself. When she finally did, he wanted documentation of the delay before he'd authorize repairs. She called me angry, as though the water had chosen to wait for her specifically. I told her I was sorry to hear it and that she should get everything in writing going forward. She hung up before I finished the sentence. My mother's car registration had lapsed. She had driven to her book club and back 3 times on an expired plate because no one had flagged the renewal date. She found out when a neighbor mentioned it in the driveway. None of these were disasters. That is what I kept thinking. Each one was inconvenient, and in some cases expensive, but none of them were the end of the world. The problem was they had all happened in the same 3-week window, and in a family that had spent 12 years running without visible friction, 3 weeks of stacked minor crises felt like a system failure. My mother started a group chat. She had not used it in years, had always preferred to call people individually, and the fact that she went to the group chat told me she was genuinely at a loss. She typed that she wasn't sure what was going on with everything lately and asked if anyone else had been having a rough few weeks. The replies came in slowly. My father said it had been a strange month. Rachel said she was dealing with a nightmare situation with her landlord. Someone mentioned the weather. No one said my name. No one drew a line between any of the events. No one looked at what all of them had in common. I read through the thread and did not type anything. Marcus called me 2 nights later. He was the youngest of us and in some ways the most perceptive, though he kept that quality quiet in the way people do when they've learned that being perceptive in a loud family mostly gets you pulled into other people's problems. He did not call to accuse me of anything. He called the way he sometimes did, carefully, like he was checking whether a door was locked before he tried to open it. He said he had noticed how much seemed to be falling apart at home all at once. Said it in a way that was more question than statement. I told him the truth. I told him I'd stopped doing the work that no one knew I was doing. He was quiet for long enough that I thought the call had dropped. Then he said it, low and serious, like he was confirming something he had suspected for a long time. I always thought Mom was just lucky things ran smoothly. It was you, wasn't it? Yes, I said. For a long time. He didn't try to talk me out of it or tell me I should reconsider. He just said he understood. And then he said something I filed away without fully knowing yet what to do with it, that he was going to start paying closer attention. I did not know exactly what he meant by that at the time. I told him good night, and I set the phone down, and outside the window the street was quiet, and nothing was asking anything of me, and I sat with that for a while. She showed up at 8:30 on a Saturday morning. I heard the knock and opened the door, and she was standing in the hallway in her good coat, the one she wore when she wanted to be taken seriously, holding a manila folder against her chest with both hands. She was not angry. That was the first thing I registered. I had been bracing for the version of her that went cold and precise when she felt let down. This was not that. She looked smaller than usual, and her eyes were doing the thing they did when she was frightened and trying not to show it. I stepped back and let her in. She sat down at my kitchen table and put the folder in front of her, but did not open it. I put the kettle on without asking because it gave me something to do with my hands, and because there are reflexes that 12 years will build into you that do not disappear just because you have decided they should. When I sat down across from her, she opened the folder. There were 3 unpaid bills inside. Utilities, 1 medical, one I did not immediately recognize, and a printed reminder about my father's overdue cardiology follow-up, 6 weeks past the scheduled date. She laid them out on the table between us like evidence at a hearing. "I don't understand what's happening," she said. "Everything is falling apart at once, and I don't know why." I looked at the papers. I looked at my mother's hands pressed flat on the table, and I felt it rise in me the way it always had, that immediate gravitational pull toward the folder, toward picking it up, toward taking the weight of it back into my hands and making the frightened look on her face go away. 12 years of that reflex, and it did not care that I had made a decision. It did not care about any of it. It just rose. I made myself stay in the chair. She wrapped her hands around the mug I set in front of her and started listing things. The penalty on the tax payment, Rachel's water damage and the dispute with the landlord, the expired registration, the missed cardiology appointment. Each item delivered not as accusation, but as evidence of a world coming loose at its seams, and her voice had a tremor in it that I had not heard before or had not let myself hear. Then she asked me to help them get back on track, the way I used to, not with anger, with exhaustion, with the specific vulnerability of someone who has always believed that a problem can be handed to the right person and made to disappear. "Please," she said, "just help us straighten it out. I don't understand why everything is collapsing." I sat across from her and I listened to that sentence, and underneath the fear in it, I heard what it actually was. There was no acknowledgement of the years. No question about how I had been managing or whether any of it had cost me anything. There was no thank you sitting anywhere in the room waiting to be said. There was only the request to resume, to step back into the position I had vacated and restore the order that everyone had been quietly living off of without knowing it had a source. She was not asking for help. She was reassigning the work. And some part of me, the part that had been trained since I was 22 to believe that this was what love looked like in this family, that part wanted to pick the folder up and tell her everything was going to be fine. I left the folder on the table. She left with the folder still in her hands. I had not taken it from her. I had not opened it. I had walked her to the door and watched her go down the hallway toward the elevator, and when the doors closed, I went back to the kitchen table and sat down and did not move for a long time. At some point, I opened my laptop. I did not plan what I was about to do. I opened a blank document, and I started writing down every task I had handled for my family over the past 12 years. Not categorized, not organized, just listed as they came to me, in whatever order memory produced them. Insurance claims, tax filings, renewal reminders, the remodel mediation, Rachel's financial aid, the frozen bank card on holiday, the contractor dispute, the lease review I did for Marcus when he moved into his first apartment, the medical referral I chased for 6 weeks when my father's GP stopped returning calls, the birthday bookings, the flight searches, the utility account resets, the landlord calls, the benefit applications, the bill negotiations. I stopped counting at 63. I sat with that number for a while. 63 distinct tasks that I could recall clearly enough to write down, which meant the actual number was larger, which meant the real weight of it had no clean figure attached to it. It had just been the background condition of my adult life, the hum beneath everything, the work that ran constantly and silently, and that everyone around me had come to experience simply as the absence of problems. I picked up my phone and called Marcus. I told him I was going to call a family meeting and I wanted him there. Not to argue my case or take a side, just to be in the room. He didn't hesitate. He said he'd be there. "You shouldn't have to do this alone," he said. "I'll be there." I told him I was not asking him to defend me. I just wanted someone in the room who had seen it. He said he understood, and I believed him. After I hung up, I opened the family group chat and typed a single message. I told them I wanted everyone at my parents' house the following Sunday afternoon, and I put the time. No explanation. No context. Nothing else. My mother replied within 4 minutes. She asked what this was about. I set the phone face down on the table and did not answer her. The message sat there with no reply beneath it, and I left it that way. And somewhere across the city, my family was looking at their phones, trying to figure out what was coming. And for the first time in 12 years, I was the one holding the information and not doing anything with it. I got there first and let myself in with a key I had carried for 11 years. My mother was in the armchair by the window. My father was on the couch. Rachel was standing near the doorway to the kitchen with her arms crossed, which was how she stood when she had already decided how she felt about something. The room had the particular tension of people who had been talking before someone arrived and had stopped. I sat down and put the printed list face down on the coffee table in front of me. Marcus arrived about a minute later. He came in, looked around the room once, and sat on the arm of the couch near my father. He did not say anything. He was there to witness, and he understood that was the role. My mother spoke first. She said she wanted to understand what was going on, why everything had felt so chaotic lately, why Daniel had been so distant. She said it with the careful gentleness of someone who had rehearsed the opening and wanted to keep the temperature low. Rachel did not keep the temperature low. She said she felt like she was being punished, that something had shifted and she did not know what she had done to deserve it, and that the whole thing felt deliberately cruel. My father looked at the floor. I let them finish. I did not interrupt, and I did not respond to any of it while they were speaking. When the room went quiet, I turned over the list and set on the coffee table so they could see it was printed, that it had pages, and I started reading. The misfiled insurance claim from year 1. Rachel's financial aid forms. The remodel mediation. The frozen bank card. The property tax reminders, 9 of them across 9 years. The cardiology referral I chased for 6 weeks. The lease I reviewed for Marcus before he signed it. The contractor dispute. The utility account resets. The flight bookings, 14 of them over the years. The landlord calls. The birthday reservations. The benefit applications. The bill negotiations. The arguments I had quietly diffused before they became something the whole family would have had to deal with. Rachel tried to interrupt me the first time around item 11. I kept reading. She tried again around item 20. I kept reading. I did not raise my voice once. I read the list the way I would read through a project audit at work, steadily, without editorial, item by item, letting the accumulation speak for itself. When I reached 63, I set the pages down. I told them that I had done all of it without being asked and without being thanked for 12 years, because I had believed it was what love looked like in this family. I told them I no longer believed that. I told them I was not coming back to the role, that they were capable adults, and that they would need to learn what I'd spent 12 years learning for them. Rachel said at first, "We never asked you to do any of that." "You never had to," I said. "That was the arrangement." My mother said my name, quietly, the way she said it when she wanted me to stop, when she wanted the version of me that would soften and absorb and let things return to normal. "Daniel, please." "No," I said. "Not anymore." The room was still. And then my father, who had not said a single word from the moment I walked in, looked up from the floor. "I didn't know," he said. Not defensive, not an excuse. Just 3 words sitting in the room with nowhere to go. And I believed him, and it did not change anything. Rachel went silent. No calls, no texts, nothing. After 12 years of treating my number like a helpline, she simply stopped making contact, and I understood that her silence was its own kind of answer. that without the function I had served, she did not have much use for the relationship. My mother sent messages, long ones, arriving in clusters, sometimes 11 at night. They followed a pattern that I recognized after the second day. 2 or 3 paragraphs of genuine remorse, soft and specific, and then a sentence or two that reframed the whole thing as something I had done to the family rather than something I was recovering from. Sometimes the apology and the accusation were in the same message, separated by a single line break. I read them all. I did not reply to most of them. My father sent one text. It said he wondered if I might want to grab lunch sometime, just the two of them. No explanation attached, just the ask. I said yes. We met at a diner near his office on a Wednesday. He was already there when I arrived, sitting in a booth by the window with his coat still on, which meant he had been early and had not yet decided whether to stay. He looked older than he had at the Sunday meeting, or maybe I was just looking at him more carefully now. He waited until the coffee came, and then he said it without preamble. I should have paid more attention. I'm sorry, son. He did not qualify it. He did not follow it with an explanation of how busy he had been or how he had assumed things were being handled. He said he had assumed Diane was managing the household details and had never thought to ask what that actually meant or where the competence was coming from. He said it plainly, like a man making an accounting of something he could not change but wanted to name correctly. I appreciate that, I said. It doesn't change what comes next, but I appreciate it. He nodded. We ate. We talked about other things, his work, a trip he was thinking about, nothing consequential. It was the most honest conversation we had managed in years, and most of it was not about any of this. When we said goodbye in the parking lot, he put his hand briefly on my shoulder, and I let him. My mother called Marcus 3 days later. I found out what happened on that call, because Marcus called me immediately after. She had asked him to talk to me, to help her understand what she had done wrong, and to be the bridge back to some version of the family that functioned the way it used to. Marcus told her gently, but without softening it, that I had been right. He told her he had seen it for years. He told her that the invisible work had been real, and that the least any of us could do was acknowledge it honestly. She hung up on him. Marcus called me and told me all of it in a straightforward way, without drama, just reporting what had happened. I asked if he was all right. He said he was fine, that he had expected something like it, and that she would come around when she was ready and not before. He was probably right about that. My mother had built an identity around the warmth and cohesion of this family, and the meeting had asked her to look at the cost of that warmth and see who had been paying it. That was not something she was going to process in a week, maybe not in a month. The gap between the apology messages and the accusation messages told me she was still deciding which version of events she could live with. The family had not resolved. It had separated into its honest shape, and I was watching it settle into that shape from a distance. And the distance felt like the first true thing I had made for myself in a very long time. 6 months out, and the shape of things had changed in ways I had not fully predicted. My father was handling his own paperwork. Slowly, with errors sometimes, the occasional misdate that he caught himself or didn't and dealt with the consequence of without calling me. He had started keeping a folder on his desk, a physical one, which I knew because he mentioned it at lunch one afternoon in a way that told me he was quietly proud of it. It was a small thing. It was not a small thing. Rachel had hired a part-time assistant for her business. She did not tell me directly. Marcus mentioned it in passing. She called me occasionally now, less than once a month, and the calls were brief and polite and did not end with anything being assigned to me. Whether there was growth or just adaptation, I genuinely could not tell you. Maybe it did not matter. My mother spoke to me with a careful politeness that had replaced the warmth she used to aim at me, like a searchlight. She called on birthdays. She asked after my work. She did not ask me to fix anything. The temperature between us was civil and cool, and I had spent a few weeks in the early months hoping it would thaw into something more honest, and then I stopped hoping that and accepted it for what it was, the relationship that was left once the function had been removed. It might stay this way. I had made my peace with that being possible. Marcus had moved closer. We had a standing dinner every other Friday at a place near his apartment that had good food and no televisions on the walls, and where we could sit for 2 hours without being rushed. A few weeks back, he had looked up from his plate and told me that watching me hold my ground had changed something in how he saw his own life. That he had started saying no to things he used to absorb at work. The extra coordination, the invisible load that somehow always found the most competent person in the room and stayed there. He said it quietly, like he was reporting a small but real development, and I listened and did not make too much of it out loud. "I don't know how you carried it that long," he said. "I don't either," I said. "I just know I'm not carrying it anymore." That dinner, that particular conversation, is the only thing from the last 12 years that I'm straightforwardly proud to have passed on. Not the fixing, not the competence, the stopping. On a Sunday morning about 3 weeks ago, I sat at my kitchen table with my phone face up and the coffee going and a book I had been meaning to read for 2 years open in front of me. The phone did not ring. Nobody needed anything flagged or forwarded or sorted out before it became a crisis. The morning was quiet in a way that used to feel like the calm before something, and now just felt like Sunday. I'd spent 12 years being the person who saw everything coming, tracking the horizon so that no one else had to. The month I stopped, my family finally saw me. Some of them clearly, some of them only in outline, some of them in ways they are still deciding what to do with. I am at peace with that. Not because it stopped hurting, but because the hurt is mine now. It belongs to me. And after 12 years of carrying things that were never mine to begin with, something that is simply and entirely mine feels like enough. There are people who hold things together so quietly that the people around them mistake the stability for luck. I was one of them for a long time. I'm not sure I would do it differently, but I'm certain I am done. Am over at where silence ends. Have you ever been the person who held everything together without anyone noticing? And what finally made you stop?